Have you ever wondered why some people have a bad experience when buying or selling their home? Well, one reason might be because they have a bad agent, but another reason might be because they themselves are making mistakes along the way. So in this video, I want to share with you some mistakes that my clients have made so that you can avoid them and hopefully have a better experience when it comes time for you to buy or sell your home here in Boise. So this is part 2 of a 2-part series that I'm doing on mistakes my clients have made. So if you haven't seen the first video, check it out after this one. So one mistake that I've seen my clients make this year is they've overestimated their remodeling capabilities.
Yeah, well, you know, maybe the house could use a little remodeling.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all for a challenge. I love it when people push themselves and do things that they never thought were possible. But I've also done enough remodeling to know that not everybody has the same level of skill when it comes to working with their hands. So earlier this year, I almost bought a house that was totally trashed. I mean, this house was the most trashed home that I've ever seen. It was owned by a hoarder, and literally inside the house were piles and piles and piles of junk, 6 feet tall with little trails that went through them. It was full of mold. It was leaking in the basement. There were 25 vehicles in the yard. So I looked to my brother and I said, let's put an offer on the house. So we put in an offer, but unfortunately we didn't get it. But after we didn't get it, we looked to each other and we said, thank you, Lord, that we didn't get that. We would have been in way over our heads. It would have cost us at least $200,000 to redo this house. Now, I know that most people wouldn't consider buying a house like that in a million years, but it is important to remember not to overestimate your abilities when it comes to remodeling.
If you don't let me gut out this house and make it my own, I will go insane and I will take you with me.
So this happened to several clients of mine this year, and let me give you 2 examples. So the first set of clients wanted to buy a house with a large lot. So we found a suitable house in Nampa, put in an offer, and it got accepted. The only problem was that the house itself was too small for my client's family. No problem, Benj, he said. All we'll do is we'll just expand the house. We'll add 1,500 feet to the back, and then we'll have a large house on a large lot. Now, he'd never done a project like this before, and as we continued to do a bit more research, we realized that this was gonna be a massive project. In order to extend the house to the back, he was gonna have to move the septic tank, tie into city sewer and water, and he was gonna try and do all of this while living out of state. So after the inspection, he looks to me and he says, Benj, I think this is probably gonna be over my head. So I look at him and say, yep, that's why we have an inspection period. Let's terminate and find you a house that actually fits you. And this happened to another set of clients of mine who were first-time home buyers. So they found a house that they liked, wasn't in too bad a shape, but it needed a little bit of work done. Some of the trim needed to be replaced. There was some work that needed to be done on the baseboards. There were some flooring issues, a little bit of plumbing issues. So we put in an offer, it gets accepted, and then when we get to the inspection, the inspector finds a few other things that need to be addressed. So after I go home that night, can't really sleep that night, I'm tossing and turning, and I call him up the next day and I say, you know, I don't usually do this, but I just don't really feel like this is the house for you. In thinking through all the things that need to be done, you've told me yourself that you're not really handyman type people. I know you're on a limited budget. I just don't want you to get into a house that's gonna be a burden on you. So the story does have a good ending. They ended up backing out of the deal and finding another house that really was a perfect fit for them. So the lesson of the story is even though literally anything on a house can be redone and fixed, it still takes the right amount of skill, time, and money. So my suggestion is don't overestimate your skill, and don't underestimate the amount of time and money it's gonna take you to do the work. Another mistake my clients made this year is they forgot to tell the listing agent that they were working with me when they went to an open house. Now this is an important one. As an agent, I'm not allowed to say, hey Mark, come here. I know you're working with Samuel over there, but he's not a good agent. I think you should work with me. Not allowed to do that. I can't interfere with a client-agent relationship that already is in place. So usually when I first meet somebody, I ask them, are you working with another agent or are you planning on working with another agent so that I can know up front if their business is already with somebody else? And well, earlier this year, I had a client who kind of forgot that. So my client calls me up and he says, hey Benj, I'm actually thinking of going to an open house this weekend. You don't need to come. I'm just gonna go to a couple open houses. I have the weekend off. I'm just checking things out. I said, that's totally fine. Just make sure you tell the listing agent that you're working with me when you go to an open house. Yeah, no problem, he says. Goes to the open houses. On Monday after the weekend, I get a call from his lender. Lender calls me up and he says, hey, Benj, I thought you were working with this guy over here, but the listing agent on this house is asking me for information about him, and he seems to be thinking that he's his agent.
Houston, we have a problem.
So I hang up with the lender, call up the listing agent. Listing agent says, yeah, nobody told me that they were working with you. I ended up working for your client all weekend. And we ended up having a pretty uncomfortable conversation. The lesson is, if you're already working with an agent, make that clear to everybody. You know, if somebody calls me up and says, hey, I'm already working with an agent, but I just have a quick question for you, I'm more than happy to help them. Of course, I want to help people. Just make it clear up front so that there's no false expectations and then some uncomfortable conversations later on. If you've liked the video so far, do me a favor and hit that like button for me. Another mistake I had a client make this year is, client thinks I'm overcharging. I hate that when that happens. I really do. I mean, the truth is nobody likes talking about how they charge. I don't want to spend my time talking about money. I want to spend my time helping you find a house that you really like. But because I don't work for free and nobody does, sometimes we have to talk about how we're going to get paid. So that's what happened in this case. My client calls me up, says he wants to sell his house. No problem, go over, explain to him everything, and here's how much I'm gonna charge you to sell your house. Totally fine with all that. He signs all of the paperwork and everything's fine until we get to when it comes time to list his home. Unfortunately, just before he started listing his home, he ran into some financial trouble. He owed some money on his car, he had some other credit card bills, and so he needed to sell his house pretty fast, and so he started to feel a little bit stressed out. So we list the house, we get an offer fairly quickly, which was nice, which he accepts. So when we get to the inspection, the inspector finds a few things that need to be dealt with. There's mold in the crawl space, and there's a few other items, and so the buyer asks for a number of concessions for those items. Seller says yes, he agrees to everything. We get to the closing table, and on the closing statement, it has all of the line items of all of the deductions, the fee for the title company, the concessions for the mold and the other items, as well as what I charged him to sell the house. And as he starts reading all of these line items and he sees them being deducted from the sales price, he starts to complain and grumble and say, you know, why are you charging me such and such to sell my house? But at that point, I'm like, I'm sorry, but we've already agreed to this a long time ago. We've already agreed to something and I expect you to honor your word. So my suggestion is please read over everything very carefully before you sign anything. If you have any questions, talk about it beforehand with your agent. Settle everything before you sign something. But once you sign the contract, just honor it. If you complain and you grumble about it, it just makes people feel uncomfortable. And another mistake I've seen my clients make this year is they've failed to narrow down an area of interest when buying a home. Now I love it when people say to me, hey Benj, come here. If you hear of any good deals, let me know. I might be interested in buying. Okay, any good deals? What does that mean? What kind of a house are you looking for? What area are you looking in? What's the price range that you're interested in? What condition of home do you want to buy? There's a lot of factors that go into buying a home, and narrowing down the search area is one of them. So if somebody calls me up, let's say from YouTube, and says, hey, I'm from out of state. I don't know exactly where I want to be, but I know I want to be in the Treasure Valley. One of the first things that I'll do is I'll go on a tour with that individual throughout the entire Treasure Valley. We'll go look at a bunch of homes in a bunch of different areas so that you can have an idea of what the different areas of the valley are like, and hopefully you can narrow down that area so we can focus on that specific area in your search. Now, usually that happens naturally, but sometimes it doesn't. So earlier this year, I had some clients who were interested in buying a home in Nampa. So we focused all of our attention on homes in Nampa. We put in a few offers. One of them finally got accepted. We go in contract. There's a couple things wrong with the house that come up in the inspection. Nothing major, but my client ends up saying, I don't think I want to be here, so backs out of the deal. So he calls me up the next day and he says, you know, I'm not interested in Nampa anymore. I want to look for a home in Star. So I say to him, Star? We haven't even considered Star this whole time. And he says, yeah, no, Star is where I want to move. Let's start looking for homes only in Star. I'm not interested in Nampa. Now that's fine. I just thought to myself, it would have been nice to have known that Star was even a possibility from the beginning, because then we could have kept our eyes open out there and there might have been a house that came up for sale that he would have liked. So my advice is try to narrow down your search as soon as possible, because it's really hard to keep your eyes open for the perfect house anywhere in the Treasure Valley. Now, if you're having trouble narrowing down an area, maybe you're watching this video from outside of Idaho, I wrote a number of resources that I think are really helpful. I wrote a guide for buying a home in Boise and visiting the Boise area that has some information on the areas and the neighborhoods. They're great resources. You can download them for free by clicking on the link in the description box below. So those are some mistakes that I hope you avoid when it comes time for you to buy or sell a house here in Boise. As always, if you have any questions about life in Idaho or real estate in the Treasure Valley, please reach out to me.